up guys and welcome back to Monique. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Heya, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology and maybe you just, I don't know, you just want to hear me blather for a little bit because I tend to just go on rants. That's all I do really on this channel. It's just all about ancient history. So if that sounds like why you are here, that was all said really fast. You guys are going to want to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But on to the topic of today's very chaotic video as per normal. Today we're going to be discussing book 9 of Homer's Iliad. So book 9 is super important for the Iliad because it gears up for book 10, and book 10 is only super important because I think it's the best book of the entire poem. You know, like people have their preferences. I think book 10 is just the coolest thing. So this book for all of you guys is important because it helps gear up for why book 10 is so cool. And it helps sort of put all of the puzzle pieces, the chess pieces in place for where they need to be in order for book 10 to flourish and be the best book ever. I'm so excited to talk about it. So if I could summarize book 9 though in a sentence, it would be that everybody begs Achilles to fight and he still says no because he's a child. That is literally what this whole book is that it's gearing up to see Achilles again and then he's still like off. But we'll get into that when we come to it, so let's just roll into the book. So the book opens with the Trojan night watches. We just have like a highlight on like sort of the last chapter because if you remember from book 8, we left literally, I think the last line was that the Trojans were now like right outside the Greek camp, right? So they've like made camp outside, they have all their fires burning and everything. So the opening of this book is just remembering that. It's just like the Trojans had their night watches going. So you're like, cool, okay. And then we cut to the Greek camp where it's nighttime, but no one's asleep yet, right? Just that we know what part of the night we're in because this night lasts a while. And none of the Greeks are asleep. They're all still awake. They're all sort of pottering around. And it's because pain and terror, these personifications of pain and terror, are sort of going through the Greek camps. Sort of they are going through the Greek camps. Just some context for pain and terror is that they're like a duo of like gods in mythology. They usually hang out with Ares, so like as he goes and he does the whole war thing, they're then like inflicting the pain and the terror on to people in the battle. That's their job. So now they're in the Greek camp and they're just sort of it up for all of them basically. So Agamemnon, he's just really stressed. There's no other way to put that. He's beyond stressed at this point. And so he tells his heralds to go and tell the rest of the famous Greek heroes to come to a meeting in his tent. He's like, this is what I have to do, like right now I need to talk this all out. All the Greek heroes show up. Agamemnon stands up in front of them and he just starts crying. Like Agamemnon just starts bawling his eyes out. He says to all of them in this moment that it's obvious that Zeus is not on their side. He's like, it is so obvious that Zeus has abandoned us because a couple of days ago, like literally like what was it, 2 days ago or something? A day ago at this, two days ago, whatever. That at some point, very recently, Zeus had told him to wake up to go sack Troy, that he was going to do that. And look at that, still no Troy. They are still unsuccessful. The Trojans are now pushing in on their camp. And Agamemnon's just like, screw it, we need to just cut our losses right now and go home. He's like, I've said it before, but I think now is the time that we should just go home because we're risking too many lives being here. And it's honestly really sad, even though a lot of people don't like Agamemnon, I for one am one of those people. In that moment, I really do feel for him. Diomedes then stands up though. Diomedes, my main man. Oh my God, I love him. He stands up and he's the first one to speak after Agamemnon says his really like heartbreaking speech. And Diomedes is like, look, man, I'm gonna fight that, all right? Here's the deal. I completely disagree with what you just said. Not that he doesn't think that Zeus is on their side, he just thinks that there is a chance that they can go and do what they set out to do. And he says to Agamemnon, like, you've slated me a bunch of times. I'm not even saying this for you. Like, you've been so rude to me. But Zeus has given you a bunch of gifts as a leader. And he highlights like his scepter, for example, like Agamemnon's scepter. He's like, that's a gift from Zeus. He lists off a bunch of things, but he does say the only thing that Zeus didn't give you was a heart, which is very obvious. And he says, that's why you have literally slated me in front of everybody. Like, you've been rude to me this entire time. However, in saying that, if you want to go home, you should go home. Diomedes points at the man's ships and he's just like, there it is, get all your men in there, it's fine, we can survive. Like, I'm sure that I'll be okay, because he says that him and Stelenos are not leaving. He's like, me, my men, my army, we're staying. We came here to sack Troy and we are not leaving until Troy has fallen. And obviously, in response to this, all the Greeks are like, yeah, Diomedes, you go, man. Diomedes then sits down, and as he sits down, Nestor stands up. As we know, there's always this constant seesaw in these types of meetings. So Nestor stands up and he congratulates Diomedes on what he said. He said, actually, what you said was like pretty great. Even though he is really young, Nestor again stresses how young everybody else is. He stresses how young Diomedes is. He says, you could literally be my youngest son. That is how freaking young you are. It's really just stressing how old Nestor is. This is like the common theme with Nestor. But either way, he says, you know, that's a really good thing that you just said. But here's my advice to everybody. It's now nighttime. We should really embrace the night. We should eat. Agamemnon, you've called us all to your tent. You need to host us. You need to, give us food and shit. We're hungry. And highlights at the end of this just how close the Trojans are to the Greek camps. And he's like, really, if we make it through tonight, like this whole night is going to be make or break for the Greek army, considering how close they are and how easily they can come in and burn everything and just destroy us, basically. So the leaders of the Greek army are told, there are like 7 of them who are told to go and gather all of their men, right? The list of names is not really that important for the video. Just 7 of them are told by Agamemnon and Nestor to go and get the rest of their men, which is like 100 men each, to go and basically make camp in the little ditch that they had spent the day digging, to go and stay there so that they can keep an eye on the Trojans, so that the Trojans don't have a chance to get in to the Greek camps. So they have their dinner out there in the ditch, right? Really glamorous. And Agamemnon then, he hosts dinner for the rest of them in his tent. And they all eat, and it's all really nice. And then when they finish up, Nestor feels like he needs more attention. I don't know why. I really don't know why. But Nestor then stands up because he's like, oh, now's my time to shine. Again. So Nestor then uses this moment to basically tell Agamemnon off, where he says, look, we're in real deep shit because the Trojans are literally right there. And you know who we need? We need Achilles. So he then mentions to Agamemnon how Agamemnon had acted really, really rashly and how nobody agreed with what he had done at the beginning of the Iliad, which I highlighted in book 1. He said, no one was on your side with taking Briseis. You shouldn't have done that. You took away his pride, his glory, all to save your own. And look where it got us. Look where the Trojans are now. So you need to figure out a way to get Achilles to come back and fight. He says it's your job now as the leader and as the person who wronged Achilles. So Agamemnon, in response, he takes this really well. He's a notorious hothead. However, he reacts really well to Nestor. And he says, you know what, man, you're so right. I was really mad and I acted really rashly. However, I'm gonna offer him a bunch of gifts and hopefully that makes up for it. This is exactly what Agamemnon was hoping for. He has no clue if it's gonna work, but he's like, here are all the gifts. And he lists off this crazy list of gifts. Like, if I go through it all, we're gonna be here all day. Just so that you know, it not only includes like war booty, so things that he has, so like tripods and things like that and all of that, but then it's also, he offers one of his daughters in marriage. He's like, you can have one of her and you don't have to provide a bride price. He's like, I'll give you a dowry, but like, he can just take my daughter without paying for her technically. So there's that. He said that he would give Achilles like 7 citadels in mainland Greece. He said that after they sacked Troy, he would give Achilles like 20 Trojan women, but in the meantime, he would give him like 7 women from Lesbos. Like it's a crazy list of things that it's just like, as you're reading it, it's just thing after thing after thing after thing, person, thing, person, thing. Briseis, he does say he will give Briseis back. And he does promise in this moment, he does say that he never slept with Briseis. He's like, he can have her. I never did anything to her. I just sort of had her in my tent, which I don't know how much of that we believe, like, please. But either way, that's the story he's going with. So he says he's going to offer Achilles all of this stuff so long as Achilles puts aside his anger and fights for them in battle. He says that's the condition. And when he's finished, Nestor is like, honestly, no one can hate you for all of these gifts. Like, this is really great that you're offering all of this. You probably shouldn't go and see Achilles. He's probably still mad, so we should send other people. So they nominate this guy called Phoenix, who you haven't seen up until this point. He's a new character. So Phoenix is nominated to go and talk to Achilles, as well as Big Ajax, Odysseus, and 2 heralds, right? So 5 people are nominated to go to Achilles to go and see him. One person can't just go. It has to be a team effort. But before they go, they obviously have to make an offering to Zeus, because Zeus, as we know, has a really bad temper and does take personal offense to this stuff. So they have to do all of that. They have to like offer the wine and whatever. And Nestor then does privately make sure that Odysseus knows the mission, because Odysseus is the one who has a way with words, right? He's like Athena's favorite because he's the wisest. So Nestor makes a point to tell Odysseus, like, this is really like your moment, man. Okay, you have to convince him, because Agamemnon's offered all the gifts. It's now your job to put all of that into words and make it sound very appealing to Achilles, because we know how Achilles is. So all the men then show up at Achilles' tent, right? They all walk over, and Achilles, when they see Achilles, he's sitting outside his tent, like playing the lyre and singing, and Patroclus is like watching him being like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. Like, they're literally just chilling the fuck out. And in fact, Achilles stops when he notices them approaching, and he like gets up in amazement, and he's like, guys, I've missed you so much. Like, what the hell? It's been a couple of days, but it just shows that no one has gone to visit Achilles, and Achilles has made it 0 effort to go and talk to anyone else. They're all in the same camp, and yet no one was like, maybe we should try and convince Achilles beforehand. So Achilles' reaction is actually kind of cute, that he's like well excited to see his friends. Like, Achilles literally ushers them into the tent. Like, they don't even have a chance to speak. He ushers them into the tent. He sits them all down on like couches and like had like a nice place to sit and eat, basically, because he has Patroclus go and make some wine. He tells Patroclus to bring all these meats over, which then Achilles like chops up, and so they then like cook them on the fire and whatever, but on these skewers. So like basically like mini kebabs type of thing. That's what they're cooking. They offer them all to the guys. They then give them like these slices of bread as well. Like Achilles is so thrilled to have guests. And him and Patroclus are just like, oh my god, we need to make them stay, we need to make them feel comfortable. It is so typical, like when you go to your mate's family home and you've known them like your whole life, and their mum is like, let me get you all of this, and all of a sudden there's like cake on the table and you're like, yo, I just came here to like stop by and say hi and pick up your child so that we can go out partying. But it's like that's the vibe that I always get from this scene. But once they are finished eating, because obviously they have to eat, there's this moment where Ajax looks over where Phoenix is and he just like nods. Like doesn't say anything, he just nods. And Odysseus sees Ajax nod to Phoenix and he's like, okay, now we're here to talk. Like now is Odysseus' chance to convince Achilles. And so he highlights how badly they need his help. They're just like, the Trojans are literally right outside the gate. And unfortunately Zeus appears to be on their side as well. So we like really need your help, Achilles. He tells Achilles that if he even remotely cares about his friends, like Odysseus and Big Ajax who are sitting there, and Phoenix, he's like, if you even remotely care about us and your actual friends, let alone Agamemnon, like who gives a shit about Agamemnon, just us, then you'll come and help us. And he does remind him about how before he left, Peleus had told him that there was like this great prophecy about how Achilles will be remembered for generations and the story will be passed down from time to time, and how that is Achilles' destiny. And he's like, this is what you have to do. Like, and if you even care, you will come out and fight for us now, and you will make sure that prophecy comes true. Obviously, he also mentions all of the gifts, right? There are like obviously like loads of gifts. So he's like, yeah, so there are all these gifts as well that Agamemnon wants to give you. But regardless of that, like Hector doesn't even think that there's any worthy fighter on the Greek side for him aside from you. So if the gifts don't help, if you're not thinking about your friends, think about the fact that you can kill Hector. Like that alone would like really help us. And Hector like really want to fight you. Really want to fight you? That was really bad English. Really wants to fight you. So he's like, just think about those things. Come back, help us out, please. And as my title gave away at the beginning of this, it doesn't go down well with Achilles. In fact, Achilles turns to Odysseus and he says, I'm only going to say this once to you because I'm not going to say this again. He actually gives us this little philosophical moment, which I do love from Achilles. He says, at the end of the day, all of us are going to die. And that's the only thing that we have in common, whether we're brave, whether we're weak. And he says that at the beginning of this war, he was brave. He was the one that was on the front line. He was the one that was attacking everybody. In fact, he tells us that he sacked like 12 cities by his boat, like via the boat. He went to go and do these things. And then on land, he sacked another 11. Like this is somebody who was like constantly fighting. And he says, I was doing all of that, and yet it doesn't make difference. He says that after he had sacked all these places, they then had to bring all the treasures back to Agamemnon, and so then Agamemnon, because he's the king, right? So then Agamemnon, he then, would divvy up all of these things and give them to the appropriate person, but he would keep more for himself. And so he highlights how important Briseis was to him, because he says, Briseis was the one thing that, it was really the one thing that he had from all of his effort. From being brave as opposed to being a coward, he got Briseis. And yet Agamemnon had to disrespect him and take that one thing. And it's really cute actually, because he describes Briseis as like the bride of his heart, which okay, we need to understand that she was still his slave. Like that's important. However, well, cute quote. Do like that. He goes on for a little bit and he's questioning, why the Greeks were even there in the first place. And he says that the reason why we all came to fight was for Helen, but it's because the sons of Atreus, aka Menelaus and Agamemnon, for some reason they believe that they're the only people who have ever loved women. That's what he says. He's like, they are not the only men to have ever loved their wives. I actually loved Briseis. I really love Briseis, and yet he still took Briseis from me. And he does highlight, he says, okay, so I did win Briseis via my spear rather than my heart, but then she took my heart when we were together, and it was like, well, cute. Once again, please remember that she still is technically his slave, so that is important. This isn't like a lovey-dovey type of moment, but it's cute considering the context of the book. And it's because of that, it's because of that whole reasoning behind it that he says that there is absolutely nothing that's going to persuade him to come out of the tent. He's like, this is now where I exist, the tent. Plus, he says the Greeks have been doing fine. He says that he would have never let Hector get that close to the Greek camps. But he's like, you guys have been doing fine. You don't really need me all that much. And he literally, this is where I get annoyed with Achilles, because he literally threatens to leave in the morning. He gives this whole thing where you kind of understand his reasoning, and then he's just like, F you guys, I'm gonna leave in the morning. And you're just like, but why? They literally came here to beg you to fight. He literally says that he only says this to Odysseus so that Odysseus has to repeat it out loud in front of all the Greeks, and he hopes that then all the Greeks will take his side rather than being on Agamemnon's side. And it's just like he starts off this whole conversation as being quite mature, and then just slowly, and then very rapidly becoming super immature. And you're just like, why? Why would you do that? And as if he couldn't get any more immature, as if saying like, I don't want to fight, I'm gonna go home, isn't immature enough for you guys. It gets worse, right? Because literally right at the end, we are now at the bottom of like Achilles being like, oh, there's the dickhead that I knew he was. So Achilles then says, I don't even want any of his gifts. They all suck. And he goes through why every one of the gifts that Agamemnon has offered is trash, including his, like, the fact that Agamemnon offered his daughters in marriage. He's just like, I don't need his daughters. The idea that he could insinuate I need his daughters to marry is utterly insulting. I could get any woman back home, and probably, honestly, I could get any woman in Greece, which, like, okay, he's really hot, so he probably could. But I'm like, that, you know, like, you didn't need to say that. Now you're just saying things to get under Odysseus' skin. Like, Odysseus is gonna be sitting there like, man, I'm trying. However, okay, last thing that Achilles says, because this is actually quite interesting, that Achilles says that Odysseus had mentioned how there was this great prophecy that Peleus had told him, which is he's trying to, you know, drive him into battle. And Achilles says, you're actually wrong about the prophecy. There are two prophecies. He's like, yo man, get your facts straight. But actually, there's one prophecy which you're right. There's one prophecy where I end up being super successful in Troy and people know me for future generations, for always and forever, and I will always be this great name that is sung and people remember who I am. The other prophecy is that I could just go home and live a totally ordinary life and that no one knows who I am, and that's kind of where I'm going right now. He's like, I'm really mad at Agamemnon, don't even want to see Agamemnon, don't even want to speak to him. I would much rather just get on my boat and live a ordinary life. Have to try and sort this out here because I'm not in the mood and I just feel really disrespected. Oh, and he does, sorry, this is actually the last thing. Wow, Achilles talks for a really long time. The last thing he says is that Phoenix, who hasn't said a word, mind you, he says, yo, Phoenix, you're also from where I'm from. So since we're gonna go tomorrow, if you want to stay over in the tent, then we can all leave tomorrow together. Then you can also do that. Then he stops talking and then Phoenix stands up because Phoenix is like, I've been spoken to. Now is my chance to actually say something. So Phoenix stands up and Phoenix is like really upset with everything that Achilles has said because he basically explains where he's from. He explains that it's kind of irrelevant, I won't lie. Like, he goes through this whole story of how he got to where Achilles is, but he's actually not from where Achilles is from. He is actually from this other place, and Peleus, who's Achilles' father, had taken him in, and he then ended up raising Achilles like his own son, so it just explains why him and Achilles are like so tight, basically. But thankfully, the whole point of Phoenix speaking right now is that he does say what everybody is thinking, which is that your anger for Agamemnon is one thing, and then your disrespect for the men who are sitting in front of you is a whole other thing. You're now disrespecting the rest of the army, you're disrespecting Odysseus, you're disrespecting Ajax, who came here, the two heralds, you're disrespecting everybody else just because Agamemnon disrespected you. And he's like, all of us kind of understood this a couple of days ago, like when you first got mad at Agamemnon, that moment, but like now we're past that and now you're just being bitter. So I'm glad someone said it. And then he goes on another rant. Phoenix goes on another story, which I was like, irrelevant again. And basically in conclusion to this story, I'm not gonna tell you the whole story because we'll be here for ages, but basically what he means by this story and what he then does say to Achilles is he said, look, if you're not gonna fight, then you have to go home. You don't have another choice, because if you stay here and you wait until Hector is burning the ships to come out and fight, no one is going to respect you. Either you come back into the fighting now, you come back into battle now, you accept the gifts, you come back in and you fight for us now. And if we all fall, then we all fall, but you still came back in. Or you say no to the gifts and you go home. People think that you're an idiot, but at least you then go home. So you do what you're saying. You cannot say no to the gifts, wait for the ships to be burning, or wait for like the camp to be burning, and then go back into war. He's like, you're not going to be respected by anyone if that is the decision that you make. And Achilles retorts being like, actually what you're talking about is honor. I don't need honor, I'm already honored. Would you not say that the name of Achilles is honored? And so he basically just tells Phoenix to shut up in a very long-winded way and respectful way. He tells Phoenix to shut up because he's like, you're sticking up for Agamemnon when actually I'm like your son and you're not sticking up for me. What the hell is that all about? So in conclusion, if you would like to sleep in the tent so that we can all go together tomorrow, you are still more than welcome to do that, and I would advise that you do that because I'm not going to come and find you in the camp. That's basically how Achilles ends that part of the conversation with Phoenix. Which, at least we stopped Phoenix talking because he was on a level that like Nestor's on when Nestor just goes off on these stories. Which like you're reading it and you're like, thank God Achilles told him to stop speaking. But thankfully when he does this, then Ajax stands up. Bear in mind, Ajax, Big Ajax has been there the entire time and not once has he said anything. So I was like, okay, hey Ajax, finally, welcome to the conversation. Except he just stands up and he looks at Odysseus and he's like, clearly This man is saying no, so that's our cue to go. And as Odysseus is getting his stuff, Ajax turns to Achilles and says, it's a real shame that you've forgotten that we're all friends. Like, it's a real shame that you've forgotten everything that we've done for you up until this point in the battle, that you can't seem to put anything else aside. And he also says that your anger is all for one woman. He's like, literally, your anger is about Briseis, who is one slave woman that we got from some town in the middle of nowhere. But like, whatever, do you, Achilles? And Achilles does kind of take this to heart, unsurprisingly, because he's super sensitive. Takes it to heart and he goes right up to Ajax and he's like, you tell Agamemnon that I'm not even gonna consider coming out into war until Hector is literally knocking at the gates, or literally knocking on the boats. Until Hector is that close, I am not coming out of my tent. Which, why did we go in this whole loop of a conversation for like Achilles to start off by being like, I'm going home, to then being like, well, I might come back in, to then being like, I will come back in as soon as Hector does this. That it's just like, Achilles, make up your mind. So the men then leave though. Odysseus, Ajax, the heralds, they all leave except Phoenix stays, and Achilles makes a little offering of wine, then they all go to bed, and so there's like a whole new bed that's made up for, what's his face, Phoenix, I just said his name, and then Achilles and Patroclus go to bed, and they're noted as going to bed with like two, like a woman for each of them in their bed, so like they're staying busy. But yeah, so then that scene comes to a close. Meanwhile, the other men show up back at Agamemnon's tent, because bear in mind, that's where they left. So they all go right back to where they came from. The men are still there. Agamemnon is like thrilled to see them. And he's like, what did Achilles say? Somebody tell me some good news. Obviously, Odysseus can't tell him any good news. Odysseus is like, right, so this is everything that Achilles said. He's still kind of mad, so he's not coming out anytime soon. But he does also mention that the reason why Phoenix isn't there is because Phoenix's prop's gonna go home with Achilles, which obviously Agamemnon is not happy about. And in response, there's literal silence. Not even just Agamemnon, like everybody else in the tent, because they're all still there, but everybody else is silent because they're like, what are we supposed to do? So naturally, in these silent moments when nobody else can step up to the plate, who does so? Diomedes! So Diomedes stands up, and Diomedes is like, look, we could be worried, however, we probably shouldn't be, because Achilles is a born fighter. That is just who Achilles is. He will come back into battle, because even if he doesn't want to come back into battle, the gods won't let him not come back into battle. He's like, remember, this is a guy who is half immortal. The gods literally will not let him do that. He will be back. Have no fear. I don't know when, but he will be. So Diomedes at the end of it, right at the end of the book, he just tells everybody to go to sleep. He's like, this is now our time to like rest, go to bed. And then in the morning, he tells Agamemnon that he should be ready for war, and that in the morning they'll like all make sacrifices and all this sort of stuff. But he's like, now is nighttime, we're all going to sleep. And that is the end of book 9. Ta-da! I feel like these books are just getting like longer and longer in conversation and not a lot in action, which like I'm sorry about, but oh my god, next episode is gonna be so great. I'm so excited for it. So if you guys want to see me just basically jump up and down in this chair, I don't know by the way if you can hear all the times the chair is squeaking, but it squeaks a lot through this episode because I'm constantly moving. If you guys don't want to miss me being a complete nerd about book 10 of the Iliad, which quality book, please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for next time where we'll be talking about the night raid of Diomedes and Odysseus. So we'll see you then.